mess now, so I can put people down.
Where is this music playing from?
My computer. Oh, wait, this one is stopping?
Yeah.
It's not stopping, but it's loading.
Yeah.
We're going to be starting pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, I see you, Thomas. You gotta.
Yeah.
You don't want to quiet them down?
It's your workshop.
Yeah.
Whenever you want to say like, oh, 5 minutes or something.
So I just do this.
Yeah, do 3. Needs to be 3.
3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, remember always to look here. The browser up here, and then the 2 things here.
Okay. Interesting.
Are we live?
Yeah.
So you let know. Just make sure Manny knows before.
Okay. What is that? Is it Codify everyone's using?
I'm not sure. I've never used it.
How do I? Okay, can you come here for a second? It's just weird.
Yeah.
All right, how do I get this GS fiddle? I just want to put it in the browser so I can explain like what it is to people if they don't have VS Code installed.
So you can copy with Command C.
This is so weird. It's like looking at 2 different things.
And then Command B is paste it, and there you go.
Okay.
And then the 3-finger thing, go to Brave up here. That's it.
Okay. 3 fingers. And let me get rid of this.
Wait, what do you want to get rid of?
Discard.
Oh.
Fat fingering.
Alright, there we go.
And this should switch slides, right?
Yeah, if you have this selected, yeah, if you down, yeah, there we go.
Okay. What time is it?
40.
Yeah, all right. Hey everybody, I'm going to start here in a second. Let me just get rid of this music.
You want to go completely rid of it?
Yeah,
Or turn it down?
just get rid of it. I'm going to teach her in a second. You want to sit like here? Unless you got to man the camera or something.
Yeah, but might leave it.
And okay.
Can you go back 1 slide?
Yeah. Do you know if audio is working for? Let's make sure that it's not buggy.
Can you say something? Okay, yeah.
Hello.
You should be
Oh,
good. Should be
okay.
good.
All right. If everyone can sign in, I'm about to get started right now. Yes, I'll be using Visual Studio Code, but in the general chat in Discord, I also posted an online link. If you don't have VS Code installed right now, you could just use that, and that'll work as well. All right, I'm going to get started then. So welcome to the CSS and HTML workshop. Right, I'm Thomas. Manny is right here. He's in the crowd. He's also an expert in HTML and CSS. Well, maybe not an expert. I'm not an expert. But if you have any questions, you can see if he can help you, and he can help you along. All right, so before I go into like what HTML and CSS are, I should explain like what front end is in like the context of like what you're learning. So front end is what the client sees when you're on a website. So when you're on a website, you see like the text and the styling, and that's the front end, which is obviously different than the back end. There's a lot of technologies in the front end. The acronyms start getting crazy pretty quick, and then there's like different plugins, and it just gets very confusing. But where you start is HTML and CSS. Yeah, you have JavaScript, React, and Bootstrap, but this is like the core of web development in general. And even if you learn backends, learning a little bit of HTML and CSS can be very useful because you can kind of prototype your website using it. So first, I'm going to show you guys what I'm working in. I'll be using VS Code, and if you guys have VS Code installed, that's great. You can do this in browser, and I'll show you guys kind of what that looks like here in a second. But also, if you have VS Code, I would recommend, and you're using HTML and CSS, I would recommend using this extension called Live Server. When you use Live Server, your HTML and CSS will automatically update online. And normally, you have to go in the browser, and you'll have to manually refresh every time you save something. And that can be kind of annoying. Also, if you're using VS Code, I'd also recommend having autosaving on. And because every time you want to update what your stuff looks like, you have to autosave it. That's kind of annoying. I'll show you guys, if you don't have this all installed, that's fine. I have posted something in the general chat in Discord, and you can use these files here. And I also, in Discord, I posted in general a text file, or not a text file, a zip file, and that has some HTML and CSS that you can get started on. Because there's like some boilerplate code that you need to make it work. And if you just want to get going, those files will help you out. But for now, I'll go back to the slides. Hold on. OK, so what is HTML? So this is an introduction to HTML and CSS. HTML is like the text that you see on the website. So you can have text, headings, photos, other things like lists, hyperlinks, tables, and there's something called a div, and that's the main structure of your website. So how you stack things and how you say like this goes here and like this is the styling for this kind of element. So this is like a very, very basic example of HTML. So there has to be a boilerplate code, and I'll kind of show you what that looks like in a second. And if you download the file, that boilerplate code is in there. And you have, if you noticed, we have H1 here and P. And those are sort of the same items as you'd use in Microsoft Word. So header 1, that's like a very large text. Paragraph, P is for paragraph. It's a paragraph text. And in HTML, you always write inside of the body. So this is a simplified version. It's missing some things in the boiler code. But this is generally what it looks like. And this is what it looks like on that web page. So there's some reoccurring HTML tags that you're going to see a lot. There's, it uses the same headings as most text editors. So P is for paragraph. H1 makes a large header. UL makes a list. Oh, that should be LI, sorry. LI makes each element inside that list. A creates a hyperlink. And I'm going to show you guys kind of what that looks like in the editor here in a second. So it doesn't look great on a slide. It doesn't really translate very well. I'll just go into that now. So inside of the HTML document, this is that header, that boiler code that I was talking about. What's that? Can I? Oh, is it? Control plus. Command plus. I'm not a Mac user. Okay. Is that better? I can do it a little bit. I can do it again probably. Okay. So as you can see, this is like the head of the file, and you also have a CSS file in here. So this is what your project folder looks like. So if you download it, you can just open this specific folder, and you can see that there's an HTML.CSS, or sorry, an index.html and a style.css. And these are kind of like, these file names specifically are usually reoccurring. Usually your style sheet is named style.css. And so this is, like I said, this is the boilerplate code. Doc type HTML, it says it's in English. This says that it's a full, it fills the entire like browser on your site. So everything like here, you don't really need to look at. This is going to be the same on every like HTML document they're going to do. And it also looks a little bit different when you're working in React. You don't actually write in your HTML document, but that's sort of aside from the point right now. Okay, so here's your body. You write all of your code that like creates text inside of the body. So here we have a header 1, says do I work? Header 2, how about this one? Header 3, stuff. And I applied some basic styling just to show that you can change the colors, but I haven't really gotten to the CSS aspect, so I'll just show you that this works. So here you can create, if you're using VS Code, you can do all of this inside of that web browser. So let's see, right here, I posted this in the general chat. So you could literally copy paste all that code right here if you downloaded it on your computer, and have your CSS here as well. And it'll show right here if you click run, it'll actually display. All right, so what this looks like, let's see. So if you have that plugin that I told you about, it's called Live Server. You install plugins like this. You just look it up. It automatically updates. So I can open it up right here. It should appear. Let's see. Hey Laz, can you help me move this over? Where'd Lazaro go? Okay, so this is, I actually just created this right here. So this is kind of like the hello world of like HTML. And don't worry too much about like the actual coloring and styling, but that's just how it visually represents. So I could say, I have some styling, I can get rid of it right now actually. Index, oops. Okay, so without styling, this is kind of how it renders. And that's pretty ugly. It doesn't really look cool, but it is what it is. And it's cool that you can just create text and put it on a web page. What's that? No, I deleted the coloring. I'll kind of get into like, that's called CSS. That's how you style the coloring and the text size, and I'll get into that in a moment. But for now, I just wanted to show you what HTML looks like, just default. And yeah, like so it has default settings for certain like H1s and paragraphs and stuff like that. So I'm going to go back into my slides. Okay. So as you've seen, there's these regular headers, or like selectors for what it looks like. And then here's probably one of the most important ones. It's called div. And you can kind of group elements together and add some structure to your website. It has like a name usually. So you say div class equals quotations, whatever name it is that you want to reference in CSS. So you could you can like target certain things in the code. And you can create some pretty interesting styles and some pretty interesting stuff using div. But I think it'll make more sense when I explain the concept of CSS first. So CSS is how you style those HTML elements. Like if you want your text to be a different color or a different size, you can target that using CSS. And I won't get into this. This is more at the end of this lecture, but there's going to be a little bit of it. You're going to have some issues with responsiveness. And not everything is as simple as it might appear in CSS. But you can target those divs using the CSS styles. So to apply styling to a div element, you use a dot. So, and that's contrary to, oh, I messed up there. There should not be a dot right there. OK, that's contrary to a regular, like a paragraph. You don't need to have a dot in front of it. And I'll show you what it looks like in the code here. Oops. So if we go to style.css, I'll put a paragraph as well, just to show. So you write, that should not be capital. So this is kind of like the format for divs and HTML in general. Is these like these brackets, these little plus and minus signs or whatever. Not plus and minus signs, but you get what I'm saying. Greater than and equal signs. And you just can write any code in here. It could be on its own line too. Like if you had like a large paragraph, you could have a lot to say. And you can see, oops, almost deleted that. You can see it disappears here. So I'm going to go back, and I'll show you that you guys can kind of target certain things in the code. So for a paragraph, if I want the color of the font to be a different color, it'll make suggestions like what colors that you could use. And you can also use like the typical like hue, like F, like a bunch of letters to select like a more specific color. And you can just copy paste that in. So if I want my color of my text to be blue, this is the format. So you have whatever element you're trying to change in brackets. You have the description of like what thing that you want to change. And then you could say it's blue. There's other things you could do. I'll explain that in a moment. But so if you check here, this is now blue. Great. And this could work for any of these elements. So I can go back here. I could say, all right, and I want my H1. I'd like this to be red. So you can also mess with the text size as well. You could say, and I want my, I think is it? No, it's font size. So I could make my header really small if I wanted to, even though that wouldn't make sense. But I can pretty much target anything in the CSS or in the HTML and give it some style. I'm not sure what this default is. I'll just leave it as default. And so earlier I described a div. And a div is like where stuff starts getting kind of interesting. So a div can be named anything. Like a div shouldn't just have a default name. Like you could make your div like this. But the whole point of div is that you start targeting specific things. So you could say div class equals box. And that's just like a basic descriptor for later when you want to say like, all right, I'd like to target the box in CSS. So we go over here, and you see how we have no like dot or anything to show. When you make a custom div, you do have to use this. So you could say dot box. And in this box, we can say kind of whatever we want. We can give this box a width, a height, a background color. So I'm going to say this box has a background color of aqua. But if you actually check it, the box does not appear because I haven't given the box any sizing. I just said there's a box and it has a color, but I didn't actually give it anything to exist. So I could say that this box has a width. And this width will be 100 pixels. And its height will be 100 pixels. Now, I'll make sure everything is auto-saving. If you go over here, then I just created this box. And you can even put divs inside divs. So if I wanted to put another div in here, I can make a div inside of this div. And that's kind of like the basics of using HTML and CSS. And once you figure out kind of how to put things into divs and containerize certain things, that's the main gist of it. Let's go back to my slides. Okay. Also, as I've said as I kind of showed you guys before, you could say color, height, width. There's hundreds and hundreds of certain elements you could apply to the CSS styles, and it's just not realistic to keep every single thing memorized. There's just a lot of information, and it's not realistic. There's also something called specificity and inheritance. So if you say that all the text should be this size, but if you write some text inside of a div, actually, that might be easier to show you. OK, so I might say that all the P's are color blue. But if I want to put a paragraph inside of this div, and I want to say, I want this to not be blue. If you see, this is blue, and I don't want it to be. So I can go to my style.css, and I can say box P. So I can say the paragraph inside of my box, I actually want this color to be, I want it to be white. Right. So you could see how this could get confusing, but whatever element, this paragraph, is going to take whatever elements it's being told from its parental element, the closest thing to it. It got told to do something generally. It says paragraph should generally be blue. But inside of my box, I said, I want this paragraph inside of my box to not be blue. And you can apply that to a lot of things. So there's some specificity. If you're more specific about things, it'll go with that more specific trait. And certain things are inherited too. So obviously this paragraph, if it wasn't color white, it would be blue. And that isn't inherited from the paragraph trait. So it inherits it from the top, unless it's told otherwise. Let's see. Certain things don't inherit. If you say width equals 50% of a div, you don't want every single element inside of that div to have that inheritance. You don't want the paragraph to be width 50%. But if you said that the color is the text color will be black, that the elements within that will be black. Does anyone have any questions, by the way? What's that?
Can you go over what a div is again?
Oh, I will go over what a div is again. So div is your way of custom creating an element in CSS in HTML And then this class, that's like telling CSS right here, class equals box, like, hey, I want everything within that div to like have certain properties. And in that CSS file, you can like target that div. So like by box, you see how it lines up. The box, you could say like, hey, I want the box to look like this. I want the box to do this. And you can go in. So it's kind of allows you to do a lot of different things. And then you can have divs inside of divs.
So you give it like a name so that you can access it?
Yeah, you give it a name so you can reference it later in CSS, which is the name is called a class. And yeah, you can customize it.
And does it always have to be a box?
No, it doesn't have to be a box. It could be, well, actually it is sort of box shape in general, usually. You can't make like a circle in CSS. It doesn't really work like that. Everything's kind of boxed in. By the way, all of this code you could do in here. I'll just copy and paste it if you want. You can also use it in, let's see, it's kind of hard to see. Command C. If you guys are using this online browser, I don't know if anyone is, you can, you can put it here. And if you hit play, it renders just like it does in VS Code. It's in general chat right now. HTML is in Java, right? HTML is not in Java, as are. OK, what's next? OK, so a major part of CSS structure is padding and margin. And you can kind of think of padding as like, a good way to remember it is padding is like on the inside of things. So if you wanted your text to not be like against a wall, you could add some padding. And if you think about like a helmet or something, you would have your padding on the inside of a helmet, and it would keep you away from the edge of the helmet. There's border. That's just like if you want to like have like a visual border around it. And then margin is how you push things away from your div. So for example, one of the easiest ways to horizontally, what's that? I'm going to show you in the code. I'm not just going to skip past this, because this is kind of a hard concept to understand. But yeah, margin pushes away. So here. So see, if I want this box to be more centered, I can actually say, so margin pushes away. So I could say, in my box, I could have margin, oops, that is not how you spell margin. Margin left, auto. Let's see. Also, a good skill, let's see, how do I right click on Mac? Command. I'm too stupid to do that. Lazar, can you come here? OK, I added margin, by the way, I added margin left auto. So here, for example, that's just putting the max margin that it could. So it's pushing this element all the way to the right. And say if I want this to be in the center, I could actually add margin right auto, and that would push it all the way to the right. It would push like as max as far as it could go. So that's one easy way to like horizontally center it. Let's see. So margin left auto, margin right auto. So great, now it's in the center. And that's something that's like kind of hard to understand at the beginning, is how you make things not like left aligned, and it can be kind of frustrating. Also, there's another interesting thing you could do. You could say for paragraphs or H1s, you could say text align. You know, in Microsoft Word, you can say like text align left, text align right. You could say text align center. So here, we can just immediately pop this in the center, and our header here is in the center. That's nice. That's easy. What's that?
Can you pause on the CSS or HTML code so that you copy it down?
Yeah.
You can send it to
Oh,
Yeah, I can send some stuff out there too. But if you're trying to follow along, I'll let you guys catch up. Maybe I'm going a little too fast.
Yeah, if you can like send it in the general,
Yeah, I'll put it in general right now.
that'd be awesome.
Oops, I don't know what I just did.
Command Z, then Command C.
Yeah. I'm not a Mac user, and I'm using Lazarus Mac.
Command.
I got it. Okay. Here's general. Okay. I think I could just like put it in a text file.
You can do free text. You know, like it's under the tilde.
I'm just copy pasting it. Sorry, general. Is this, yeah, this is good. Okay, so that's the CSS, and this is the current HTML. Yeah, maybe you could just put that in a text file. Yeah. And that's the HTML. That's just what I'm currently at, if you guys want to have it on your monitor. Any questions? Yeah. Is this making sense? Am I going too fast? You can make it look like a circle, but like the actual like frame in HTML and CSS, it doesn't like, you can't recognize circles. It's yeah. Yeah, you could have like a circle inside of a box, and you could visually make a circle, but you couldn't actually, like your div could not be a circle. Like it doesn't work like, you can't fill it like a one of those like ball pits. It doesn't work like that. It's like boxes. The circle could be in a box in the ball pit, but it doesn't like overlap like that. What was that? You can make a circle in CSS. You can also, you could say,
Are you limited to the amount of shapes you can make?
what was that?
Is it only a box?
No, you can make all sorts of shapes. It just, sometimes it gets complicated. And some things I think would make more sense to make in like an SVG.
Right.
A lot of people make like really pretty UI in SVGs. Like you could do it in CSS, but it is difficult. And also one thing with CSS is that it also has to be responsive. So that triangle has to like change shapes like on a phone, and that can get kind of complicated.
Border radius.
Yeah, you can do border radius. I was going to teach that. Like, you could make a nice circle. Like, you could make this kind of into a circle by saying border radius, like 10 pixels. That's one of like the major CSS things. So I'll show you. When I put border radius, I actually give this kind of an edge.
You make it darker color.
What's that?
Darker.
Is it like hard to see? Let's see. I'm just taking style requests now. Purple. This screen is really weird too, so it doesn't look like the way it should. And with that border radius, like I said, I think you can do it in percents as well. I'm pretty sure you could do 100%. See, I made a circle, everyone. But now this text is like, it's not padded. So how do I right click? Control C. Oh, okay. Hi. Sure. In VS Code? Did they download that plugin? Yes. Okay, right here, there's a Go Live button after you download the plugin. Maybe you need to restart your VS Code if it's not appearing.
It is appearing, but what happens is that it opens up a bunch of folders instead.
Manny, can you go help them after you're done helping him? They need help getting it to render. Okay. So I have not mentioned this. This is a very important tool. There's something called inspect. And you can kind of see how the CSS is supposed to look. So if you right-click a web page, I know in Chrome you can just right-click and say inspect. It might be a little different in if you use like Explorer or something. Yeah. But you can see like you can zoom in kind of. So you can see I talked about how there's a head and there's a body. I'm gonna let everyone catch up actually. Any chatters? Hi chat. I'm glad that you believe in me. Oh, you believe in Azar. HTML is not in Java. Okay. Where are the slides available? We'll post the slides after. Just make sure you're in Discord. Hey, Laz. Where's Laz? Oh, your shit's kind of dying. Yo, Laz, can I get some water? Yeah. My mouth is getting dry.
You have like a water bottle you want to fill up?
No.
No?
Let me just. I see like like on talk shows they get like they get the cup of water.
Yeah, don't do the straw because I drank it.
Okay. You got a straw?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Casey, how you guys doing back there? All right. Yo, Manny. How's it going back there? Okay. Does anyone else need help right now? Because I could, if you guys are. You should restart your VS Code if you just installed it. Sometimes that's the solution. You did?
Hello, how are we doing? Taking over for Thomas for a little bit. You know, he's helping out people. I'm not. What the Laz, you want to come up? I'm just checking to make sure that the online people, no help, no anything. Everything works. Please go ahead.
Subscribe to like constant stream data just in case there are changes to the database and you want to update it on your server without actually refreshing the server.
Okay, so Lazarus asked a really good question. He just asked, how can you join DSC? What? I didn't even hear half the question you asked, Laz.
Oh, why don't you ask him in the mic?
Yes, please. Come here, please.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
How can you subscribe to a constant stream of data? So when there are changes on your database, your client side, the front end, right, picks up on those changes because it's subscribed to this data stream.
Oh, you're talking about a dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Dynamic website. So that depends. Well, first you have to have it hosted well. Am I wrong though? You can't use Heroku without Heroku free. They don't let you have dynamic. Anyways. Yeah, sorry, it's GitHub. No, but actually, serious question. Like, if anybody has questions online, please let us know because we're here for you. I see. I'm going to be answering some of this stuff. Azar asked. I don't know if Thomas answered this. I don't think he did. But he asked, "Is HTML in Java?" It is not, Azar. Luckily not. It's its own language. It's not a programming language actually. I think they consider a scripting language. But one day I'll figure out how to do HTML and CSS in Java. Yes, let me know when you do. Alonzo has nice words for Thomas. And of course, Azar always supporting. I hope you guys are understanding it well. I know it's a lot to take in, right? Because there's a lot to do. But so far I'm really enjoying it. I'm not a web dev type of person, so this is really cool to me, very new. And I actually do need to know HTML and CSS. So do give us a little bit of time. If you're there, and if you're watching this later, we'll have this resolved soon. We have quite a lot of people here, and of course it's kind of hard like starting out, right? All right. So I will leave you here, but I will not be gone. Take care.
Yep, I'm good. All right, guys, I'm gonna start teaching some more. As long as everybody's good, nobody's dying. Is anyone like really confused? All right, let's get going. So earlier someone asked me if you can make a circle. You can't really make a circle like shape. You can make a circle, you can make something look like a circle, but it's not actually a circle, it's a square. It's a circle inside of a square. And one way that you can use, you can make like boxes rounded is you could use, here in CSS, there's something called border radius. And you can make things visually like have the corners cut off. And you can have it cranked out very high so it just turns into a circle. What's that? Okay. Let me go back to slides. Okay, so here I kind of just explained how margin left and right works. You can also use margin top and bottom. So for example, if I wanted my box right here, if I wanted it to have some space away from this line right here, I could put some margin on the top and give that space. Or I could put it on the bottom, vice versa. But generally, sometimes you want elements to not be like right on top of each other. So that's where margin comes in. So I'll make it more dramatic. I'll give this margin top like 30 pixels. Oops, what just happened here? Okay. So one very important tool when you're using web development, specifically front end, is the inspect element. You can see like where your margin is. So here, you actually can visually see in the inspect area. Oops. Let's see. How do I scroll this? Why can't I scroll? Okay, cool. You can see, so I made this kind of centered like horizontally. And can the side conversations, if they're not super relevant to what's going on, settle down a little bit? I know. You guys are listening. What's up? I'm just going to tell them to shut up. Hey, y'all, can y'all cut the chit chat? Because it's like getting really loud and I can't talk over everybody. I'm like screaming. Sorry. Okay, so as you can see, there's some margin here. And in the inspect element in Chrome or whatever browser you're using, you can actually see like where the margin is. And it's actually very useful. And in this element, you can see I added some rounding, and it actually cut off my eye a little bit. So I want this little paragraph to be maybe a little bit further from the top of that div element, or a little bit to like the right of the div element. So if I want to make that div element like look better, I could add some padding. So you can specify which angle, like you could say like padding top, padding bottom. For this one, I just want padding all around. So I could say I want, oops, that is not what I wanted to do. If I want 10 pixels of padding, I could just add that right here. Did I lose my browser? And this thing is still the same size, but I made it so with adding that padding, I made it so this is like a little bit pressed off the sides. And actually, if you see here, it'll actually tell you like where the padding and the margin is, like in the browser. So you can say, oh wait, let me get to where the element that I want to look at. So this one right here, this box element, I can say, all right, the box is 100 by 100. There's some padding on the inside. This padding, it keeps the text from like touching the edges. And then there could be border, which would add like some visual appeal to like maybe separate like visually from the rest of the page. And then also you could have margin. So I added some extra margin on top, 30 pixels, and I said margin auto on the left side and the right side, and that gives it like a perfect center. What's that?
So if you change something and this prompt doesn't
No, you can't change anything. You can't change anything within inspect. It just shows you what it looks like currently. And sometimes you'll change an element, and maybe it's inheriting something from somewhere else, and it's not behaving the way that you think it is. And you can actually kind of like go through here, and you can look through this and be like, all right, my height is 100 pixels, but it's not actually showing as 100 pixels. Like, why is that? And it can come. It's like your main way to debug the front end. Okay. That's kind of like the basics of padding, and that's really important. Let's get back to the lecture. Okay. Padding is like something I could probably go on for like, that could be like a whole lecture in itself, to be honest. Okay. I'm probably going to skip this section, but you can target divs to act differently in different screen sizes. So you could say like, for example, if you have something that's set to like 500 pixels wide, like an image, maybe you don't want that image to be the same size inside of a phone. Like 500 pixels is really wide. And if you set something to be stock 500 pixels in every case, it doesn't make sense. So if you have 500 pixels on your phone, that'll take up the entire width of the screen. And there's something called a media query, and I have a slide next that kind of like shows you how that looks. And you can kind of change how.
Show them with
Yeah.
sizes.
No, I'll show them like with inspect. And because there's just different screen sizes, so you don't want everything to look the same. Like for example, like if you're on like Instagram or like Pinterest or something, and there's like 5 recipes on your desktop, you don't want 5 recipes when you're on Pinterest on your phone. They'd be like this small. Like it just, so things need to be different sizes for different cases. Let me show you. Let's see. Media queries, CSS. I'm just going to pull up an example. I'm just going to pull an example from online and show you kind of like what a media query actually does. So at the bottom, so the way also CSS works is that the most recent code is the code that gets put. So if I put another paragraph here, and I said the color should be aquamarine, I have a paragraph up here, and this one actually gets invalidated because this one is more recent in the code. It's towards the bottom. But a media query, you always put at the bottom of your CSS. And you can do something like this. I set my body to be tan. And let's see, I'll just inspect my element. This is hideous, by the way, but I set media queries so it behaves differently at different like widths. So if I hit a certain width point, it's going to change colors. Let's see. Oops. But you can make like an element completely disappear that you don't want anymore when it's too small, or something else. Or just in general, like you could even change like the text size or like the image size. Like this is, you see that this element right here is 100 by 100. Like if you had it on like a tiny phone, it would be still 100 by 100. Or if you had it over here, it would be 100 by 100. What's that?
So how is the color changing as you move it back and forth?
It hits a breakpoint. So there's like, it's like when it's, you can see, does it say what pixel width it is right now?
It wasn't when you were dragging it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It says what pixel it is. I set it here in the code. And this is like arbitrary. I just put it like as a random thing. And it could be anything you want. Usually like Bootstrap is a CSS framework and it has like its own. Like max width 992, I think that's usually, this is saying if it's greater than, no, if it's smaller than 992 pixels, then it's going to be blue. And if it's smaller than 600 pixels, it's going to be, and you can set that to anything, really. And that's how a media query works. And this isn't like, this kind of gets like a little bit more advanced, but I think it's important that you know that they exist. Okay. There's also other things. There's some good elements called view height. So you could say instead of having this be 100 pixels, you could say it's like 10 view height, and that's 10% of the screen. And that'll like scale to like if you have a phone screen. Or you could even say width. So if I want this, element, this box, to be like half of the screen width, I could just set that real quick. So instead of width being hard pixels, generally when you use pixels, you should like very rarely use pixels in front end. Pixels are actually kind of bad, and you're supposed to use rems, which rems are kind of like pixels, but they're adaptable. And when in a browser, if you say like, I want the text to be larger, pixels do not get larger, but rems do. So it helps like people that are like visually disabled be able to see it. And also, if you care about your website being listed on Google, Google does not like to give high listings to websites that aren't like helping blind people,
That are not.
visually impaired people. So if I want this to be, I could say this is 30 V. Why does this keep happening?
Command shift that.
I just keep fat palming the bar. Okay, and I could say the width. So I said that it's 30 view height, so it's 30% of the screen. And the width will be 60%. And that 60% just means it's 60% of the element that it's in. So this box is inside the body of my code, so it'll be 60% of the body. And if I have something inside of that box, I could have another div inside of that box, and I could give that one a width. And that width would be like, you could say, I want that one to be 80% of the box. And the box is 60% of the main screen. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I said the box will be 60%, and the view height is like 30. So that's like 30% of the screen. And generally, yeah, like you should try to avoid using pixels, because if I show you, if I make this smaller, it moves with it instead of just being fixed. And generally, you can make things look a lot better. What's that?
So in how would the text end up becoming larger with RAM?
Rem, I think the, I don't know, I think the rem, I think the rem, I think the rem is like 30 view height, so it's 30% of the screen. And generally, you can make things look a lot better. What's that?
So in how would the text end up becoming larger with RAM?
Rem, I think how would the text end up becoming larger?
Yeah, so let's say you were shrinking the page like you just did. Would that mean the text would also become larger, or?
It would shift with that.
Okay.
Also, it would like in the browser settings. If you change the browser settings, you could do it there. Yeah.
Okay.
Like you could, I think in like a lot of browsers, you could be like text size like large, and it'll just move all, and everything that has rim will just change. Unlike text.
So that's just not possible, or is it just like shitty quality?
What was that?
Is it like shitty quality, or pixels?
It's not possible.
It's just not possible at all?
Yeah. Pixels are the enemy in front end. Unless you just like want it to be a web browser, but everyone's on their phones, so it just doesn't make sense to make things that only work for web.
Go back to style.css.
Yeah.
Probably like it says like height.
Yeah. So that's height equals view height is like a instead of using pixels, you could say view height, and that's like percent. Like a view height is like that's saying 30% of the view height of the screen. And it kind of gets confusing because width is percent, but view height is not percent. You'll try to say like 30% height, and that doesn't work. It can confuse you sometimes. I mean, there's a ton of these little things, and generally, like, you can't keep them all memorized. You just have to Google them. Like, how do I make this look like this? And you should be able to find an answer online. What's that? Yeah. So 30 view height means 30% of the height of the screen that you're on. So if you had it on a phone, it would be 30% of that phone height. And then if you have it on like a big screen, like a 1080 monitor, then it would be the 30% of that, which makes it more scalable. Yeah, it's 30%. View height is actually percent. And you can also have like width percent, and that width will just be the width of the parent container, whatever it's wrapped in. Like if I put another div here, so I'll show you. I can put another div inside of this box. Div class equals inner box. Oops, gotta put it in quotes. Inner box, right. And I could say, oh, I don't have to say anything at all. And in that inner box, I could give it a background color. So just like how I make a new element, I'm going to say inner box in CSS. We'll say background color will be, I'm really tired of using these ugly colors. Orange. And this will have width, and this width will be like 95%. And its height will be, its height will be 25 view height. So this is going to be 25% of the height of the screen. So I just put this in here, and it's if I wanted to put margin left and margin right auto, I could also make that centered. But right now, at default, it's like stuck on the side. And I think there's padding, so that's why I mentioned that I put 10 pixels of padding on in the parent container, so it's not touching the side. I'll make it centered just for fun. You could just say margin auto too. So that it's centered. Honestly, vertically centering is kind of annoying, and I always have to look up how to do it. And that's kind of a meme within front end. It's like if you apply to a job, like people will be like, "Oh, like can you vertically center a div though?" All right. Let's see. What was I going to talk about? I'm not going to demonstrate rims and eames. I don't think that's quite necessary. Oops, this is not it. This is an example of a media query. This is what it looks like. You can also use min width. So that's saying like if it's larger than that, then it'll look a certain way. versus max width, which is just a different way of writing the media query. Let's see, I think I'm about done. Okay, so there's another thing called flexbox. So normally things are displayed in block format. So like, oops, everything is like, actually, everything is like vertical on top of each other. I'm gonna get rid of this background color because it's so ugly. I can't stand it. Okay. Sorry, what was I saying? So if you want like certain like multiple elements in line, you can't really do that in the current settings, and it's really annoying. So you can actually use something called CSS Flexbox, and you could have like 3 columns essentially, and then also those columns could collapse when it gets smaller because maybe you want 3, like for example, like Pinterest again, which is funny because we're doing that in web dev kind of, but you could have 3 like elements, like 3 boxes, and you want 3 boxes when it's really wide, but you might not want 3 boxes when it's not really wide. So as it condenses, like CSS will know like, hey, those 3 boxes can't be like parallel anymore. Like they actually like will minimize.
So they'll stack on top of each other? Or?
Yeah, they'll stack on top of each other, and you can actually like customize it. Like you could even say like which one, like the order of which they stack. But that's like sort of like extra. Like I wouldn't teach that in this workshop because it gets really confusing using CSS Flexbox. But that's like something that you should know about, like that it exists at least, that you could look it up. What's that?
Yeah, so how do you make like the inner box like inside like that other box? Like how do you do that?
Okay, so to make a div instead of a div, it's called like a nested div. And I just wrote this div inside of this div. Do you see? I have this div. I'll separate it. I have this div box, right? It ends here. And then I wrote this div inner box here. And I could delete it to make it look a little cleaner. Okay. And then obviously this, like how that thing is perceived, you have to give it like the width and the height to make it make sense inside that other object. Because if you just write a div in there, it doesn't mean anything. Okay. So I talked about Flexbox, and then this is pretty much it. There's a really good website called w3schools.com, and they have like tutorials, or it's just like pretty much documentation, but like in a less. Sometimes documentation can be ugly to look at, so you can see like all the ways that you could style it, and all the ways that you could like, I guess, document the CSS, the HTML and CSS. Also, you can use fonts.google.com, and you can import any fonts you want into your CSS document, and you can make like some pretty fonts that looks. If you use like Times New Roman, it just looks really ugly. So you can upgrade your fonts to look a lot better. I didn't really talk about handling images. It's not like that complicated. It's pretty much the way you handle a div. You could put an image instead of a div. Or multiple web pages, and there's just different ways to call classes and like style things, but this is just the way that I usually do it. And there's other ways of doing things. But that's pretty much it for like the main part. I might just mess around in CSS and HTML and answer. Does anyone have any questions on how to do things? What's that?
Yeah, so for W3 schools, like that website also goes over like that stuff that's not taught, right? Like the handling images.
Yes, yeah, everything. I just like this website a lot. let's see. Let's browse it. So, okay. It has like the basics, but I think the CSS is more interesting. Oh. Because HTML is pretty easy. It's the CSS that's kind of gets complicated. Is my mic on? Okay. Okay. So like CSS selectors, like you could say paragraph, or you can give things IDs too. That's like something I haven't really got into, but I usually don't give things IDs because I just don't do that. Like I usually do CSS in React, and that just doesn't really work with the workflow as well. Comments. Okay. Pretty much everything you want to look at, like you could just read like an article about how fonts work in CSS. Even like talking about like sans serif, like so that's just more like aesthetic based stuff. Let's see, max width. You could look up like flexbox, rounded corners, and I'll talk to you about how to make rounded corners. So this website, you can pretty much look up anything that you need to in CSS, and it'll tell you what it looks like. It gives you example code, and it's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a lot to it, but like just understanding the basics of like how to stack divs and stuff like that and how to interact with divs is like the first step. And then usually like once you know the very basics, then you just try to make something, and that's the best way of learning. Because like you can just watch a video, but it doesn't really like hit unless you like actually change the div and actually do it. So you just have to get in there as soon as you know enough to make it work. But that's pretty much it for this. If anyone has questions, if you guys want to hang out and talk, that's cool. But I don't have too much more material for you guys. I'll be here. I'll answer questions. I'll help you write stuff.
Did it end or you just asked for a clap?
No, it's
I
over.
know you asked for a drum roll.
Yeah, no, I'm done.
Okay.
I should probably end the live stream, I suppose.
Yeah.
Let's see if anyone has any questions in the live stream. Thank you, Azar. Yeah, if anyone has any questions in the live stream, let me know. If so, I'm going to end it here in a moment.
Oh, you have to go here.
It's 2 concurrent viewers. It's Azar. Goodbye, Azar. You're the only one.